Yeah, read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 9, Text 19. We're reading about Jad Bharat and how Goddess Kali herself personally intervened to protect him when he had been captured by some thieves and dacoits. They were trying to use him as a human sacrifice so they could get more power. And they were going to offer him as a human sacrifice to the goddess Kali, which is not recommended in any scriptures anywhere. They completely made that up. But unfortunately for them, or maybe fortunately, they couldn't recognize that Jad Bharat was a pure devotee of the Lord. So Goddess Kali was not going to stand for that. So she burst out of the deity. The goddess burst out of the deity and attacked all the thieves and killed them all. Pretty gruesome. Says that cut their heads off and drank their blood. Anyway, material world can be a very gruesome place at times. It's always a place of suffering, but sometimes it's pretty gruesome. So, that's what happened. Now we're going on to text 19. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paskitadi Satarni Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. It's text 19. When an envious person commits an offense before a great personality, he is always punished in the way mentioned above. There's no purport on this. He is always punished in the way mentioned above. So, we can see is that he's punished very severely. We see that Hiranyakashipu also received the punishment for being envious of his son Prahlad. And the Lord himself burst from the pillar and stretched him across his lap and tore him open in the abdomen and pulled his entrails out. These things aren't there to, scare us. Of course, those with demoniac envious mentality, it would help them if they would become a little frightened. But for the devotee, they're not afraid. Like Prahlad, he saw this, and he wasn't at all afraid of Lord Nrsingadev. He loved Lord Nrsingadev because he's an incarnation of Krishna. And he only asked that his father get liberation. His father was a demon. And similarly, Jad Bharat, he wasn't at all afraid of Goddess Kali. Not at all. He could understand that she's a great servant of the Lord, and this was her service. In serving the Lord was to protect his devotee. So those who are envious and commit an offense before a great personality are always punished in this way. Text 20. Sukadeva Goswami then said to Maharaj Parikshit, O Vishnudat, those who already know that the soul is separate from the body, who are liberated from the invincible knot in the heart, who are always engaged in welfare activities for all living entities, and who never contemplate harming anyone, are always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who carries his disc, the Sudarshan Chakra, and acts as supreme time to kill the demons and protect his devotees. The devotees always take shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. Therefore, at all times, even if threatened by decapitation, they remain unagitated. For them, this is not at all wonderful. Supreme Lord carries his disc, Sudarshan Chakra, and acts as supreme time to kill the demons. So he acts as time. He says, time I am. So in due course of time, the demons are killed. The devotee is not afraid of time. His devotee is not identifying with the temporary material body or mind, which in due course of time will be destroyed. So for them there's no fear, and they understand that in no way are they destroyed, just the outer coverings. So they remain unagitated. There have been many great personalities in history, throughout history, that history has remembered and recorded. I believe there was the Greek philosopher Socrates, who had reached a very high level of being able to differentiate between spirit and matter. And as is the case with such personalities, when they start to instruct others, because attachment for fruitive activity becomes decreased as one begins to transcend the material nature and the urges of the senses, it can interfere with those who are very fruitive and very desirous of getting a profit out of others engaging in fruitive activity, profit motive. So he was causing a bit of a disturbance by his preaching, because the madness for fruitive activity was being subdued by his preaching. People that were hearing from him, they were coming to him, his students were becoming enlightened, and they had no more desire to be so engaged in fruitive activity. So those who were very fruitive on that platform of material identification and entanglement decided it was time for Socrates to be eliminated. He was getting in the way. So he was tried and found guilty of whatever, and he was sentenced to drink poison, which he did. He had already reached quite a ripe old age. He was in his 70s, and what could he do? The deck was stacked against him by these people. And because he was so transcendental, he didn't lament about it. He wasn't fearful at all. He accepted it as the will of the higher realms. And I believe he made some incredible statements at the time, something like, if they're going to kill me, they'll have to catch me first, because he didn't identify with the body. They were going to be destroying his grossly manifest outward covering, which he knew wasn't actually him. He knew he was transcendental to that. So he made that statement that, oh, they want to kill me? But they'll have to catch me first. He was in prison, so they had captured his gross body. But the soul, you can't capture the soul? It can't be poisoned, it can't be killed by weapons, it can't be cut in pieces, can't be drowned. It's not material. So there are many that history has remembered as transcending this material body. And the devotee is topmost. The devotee is the topmost of those because they are situated at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. That is the highest realization of the personality of Godhead. So for them, what is to be the fear? So that's a very desirable level to attain, because at some point the body will be destroyed. So to use one's life and energies to be able to get to that level of devotional service and not to be disturbed at the time of death, be able to fix the mind on Krishna peacefully, Krishna and Krishna's devotees. Krishna never appears alone. So that's why we hear and chant and read, try to fix our mind on Krishna, to prepare for the inevitable. This is the best way to prepare for the inevitable. Commentary by Prabhupada. These are some of the great qualities of a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. First, a devotee is firmly convinced of his spiritual identity. He never identifies with the body. He's firmly convinced that the spirit soul is different from the body. Consequently, he fears nothing. Even though his life may be threatened, he's not at all afraid. He does not even treat an enemy like an enemy. Such are the qualifications of devotees. Devotees are always fully dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Lord is always eager to give them all protection in all circumstances. It's not that the devotee is a fool or oblivious. He's taking directions from the Lord. And the Lord may give different directions at different times. He may give the devotee good intelligence how to avoid a dangerous situation. Or he may intervene himself. If there's nothing that the devotee can do, like Prahlad, what could Prahlad do? Couldn't do anything. Couldn't run, he was just 5 years old, little boy. And Jad Bharat, he was depending on the Lord, and the Lord personally intervened. Arjuna found himself in a difficult situation. And the Lord gave him good intelligence, guided his chariot, directed him in the battle, and he was victorious. So there's different ways the Lord protects the devotee, intervenes. And the only business of the devotee is to depend on the Lord. So this is chapter 10. And there's a summary study. A little, not summary study, a little summary at the beginning of the chapter, so we'll know what to expect. In this chapter, Bharat Maharaj, now Jad Bharat, was successfully accepted by King Rahugana. the ruler of the states known as Sindhu and Sovira. The king forced Jud Bharat to carry his palanquin and chastised him because he did not carry it properly. A carrier of King Rahugana's palanquin was needed. To fulfill this need, the chief carriers found Jud Bharat as the most likely person to do the work. He was therefore forced to carry the palanquin. Jud Bharat, however, did not protest this proud order, but humbly accepted the job and carried the palanquin. While carrying it, however, he was very careful to see he did not step on an ant. Whenever he saw one, he would stop until the ant had passed. Because of this, he could not keep pace with the other carriers. The king, within the palanquin, became very disturbed and chastised Jud Bharat with filthy language. But Jud Bharat, being completely freed from bodily conception, did not protest. He proceeded carrying the palanquin. When he continued as before, the king threatened him with punishment. And being threatened by the king, Jud Bharat began to talk. He protested against the filthy language used by the king when the king chastised him, and the king, hearing the instructions of Jud Bharat, was awakened to his real knowledge. When he came to his consciousness, he understood he had offended a learned and saintly person. At that time, he very humbly and respectfully prayed to Jud Bharat. He now wanted to understand the deep meaning of the philosophical words used by Jud Bharat, and with great sincerity begged his pardon. He admitted that if one offends the lotus feet of a pure devotee, he is certainly punished by the trident of Lord Shiva. Text 1. Sukadeva Goswami continued, My dear king, after this, King Rahugana, ruler of the states known as Sindhu and Sovira, was going to Kapila ashram. When the king's chief palanquin carriers reached the banks of river Ikshramati, they needed another carrier. Therefore they began searching for someone, and by chance they came upon Jud Bharat. They considered the fact that Jud Bharat was very young and strong, had firm limbs. Like cows and asses, he was quite fit to carry loads. Thinking in this way, although the great soul Jud Bharat was unfit for such work, they nonetheless unhesitatingly forced him to carry the palanquin. It's interesting that although Jud Bharat was not fed very nicely, and he was not sheltered very nicely either, that his body was very healthy and strong. It's not like he was suffering from so many diseases. For one thing, he wasn't in anxiety. He was peaceful. He was actually ecstatic. So even though, materially speaking, he wasn't being fed very nicely, he wasn't being sheltered very nicely, and even he wasn't bothering to really bathe so much, he was very healthy and strong. The strength came from within. Text 2. The palanquin, however, was very erratically carried by Jud Bharat due to his sense of non-violence. As he stepped forward, he checked before him every 3 feet to see whether he was about to step on ants. Consequently, he could not keep pace with the other carriers. Due to this, the palanquin was shaking, and King Rahugana immediately asked the carriers, "Why are you carrying this palanquin unevenly? Better carry it properly." Prabhupada's commentary. Although Jud Bharat was forced to carry the palanquin, he did not give up his sympathetic feelings toward the poor ants passing on the road. The devotee of the Lord does not forget his devotional service and other favorable activities, even when he is in a most distressful condition. Jud Bharat was a qualified Brahmin, highly elevated in spiritual knowledge, yet he was forced to carry the palanquin. He did not mind this, But while walking on the road, he could not forget his duty to avoid killing even an ant. A Vaishnava is never envious or unnecessarily violent. There were many ants on the path, but Jad Bharat took care by looking ahead 3 feet. When the ants were no longer in his way, he would place his foot on the ground. A Vaishnava is always very kind at heart to all living entities. In his Sankhya Yoga, Lord Kapiladeva explains, Surida Sarvadehinam. Living entities assume different bodily forms. Those who are not Vaishnavas consider only human society worthy of their sympathy, but Krishna claims to be the Supreme Father of all life forms. Consequently, Vaishnava takes care not to annihilate untimely or unnecessarily any life form. All living entities have to fulfill a certain duration for being encaged in a particular type of material body. They have to finish the duration allotted to a particular body before being promoted or evolved to another body. Killing an animal or any other living being simply places an impediment in the way of his completing his term of imprisonment in a certain body. One should therefore not kill bodies for one's own sense gratification, for this will implicate one in sinful activity. Of course, Jad Bharat was more than just a qualified Brahmin. He was a Vaishnava, a greatly elevated soul. But we can see that because of the way the Varnashram system, if someone has the sentiment of Brahmin, for them to be engaged as Sudra is very, 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 very difficult. Because here, seeing Jad Bharat as a Brahmin, and he's being forced to serve as a Sudra, he can't do it because his nature is Brahminical. It's more than Brahminical, but for purposes of discussing the importance of establishing Varnashram system for the smooth running of society and for the happiness and well-being of the members of the society. It's a very awkward position to be in, to have the sentiment and the realization and the temperament of a Brahmin and being forced to serve as a Sudra. So his Brahminical training was non-violence, not to cause distress to anyone. And here he was having to carry like a cow or a buffalo or something, or a horse, to an oxen, to just out of brute strength, use his brute strength for service. So, because he was elevated, he didn't compromise his transcendental nature. He didn't compromise his spiritual values. And as a result, he was going to receive the wrath of Maharaj Rahugana. So the king was displeased. But actually it's the king's duty to see that everyone is engaged according to the propensities. And it should be obvious that his propensities are not for Sudra work. So that'll come out later. So in hearing this, you say, well, how do I implement this instruction? Killing an animal or any other living being simply places an impediment for that living entity to work out his term of imprisonment in that body. And that implicates the person who causes that violence in sinful activity. How do we implement that in life now as it is? I mean, Jad Bharat is avoiding ants. The only solution would be to engage constantly in devotional service. And if in the course of performing devotional service another living entity is disturbed, then what can be done? Like, I think there's a sect, I don't know which one it is, but they wear a cloth over their mouth so they won't breathe in any living entities, any little living entities, because they don't want to cause that sinful reaction. But just in the course of everyday activity, living entities, germs, bugs, just breathing, killing so many living beings, living entities, serving out their term in those bodies. So really, the only solution is to be engaged 100% in hearing, chanting, and remembering Supreme Personality of Godhead and engaging in His service, worshiping, praying, serving the lotus feet. There are 9 types of devotional service, 9 forms. And Krishna says, just surrender unto me, and I'll protect you from all sinful reactions. Otherwise, well, you've got 2 people. One's a devotee, and the other is not. They're both vegetarians. But just because someone's a vegetarian doesn't mean there isn't a sinful reaction for disturbing those plants. A lot of times, in trying to discuss with those who are attached to eating meat, they'll bring up that argument. Well, a carrot's a living entity too. And, I mean, you're killing that carrot, you're pulling it out of the ground. And they're right. They're absolutely right. It's less violent, but they're right. And Krishna says that if you offer to me with love and devotion foodstuffs from a certain category, which doesn't include meat, fish, or eggs, doesn't include those things, you offer with love, I'll accept. And if Krishna accepts and then the devotee eats the remnants, there's no sinful reaction. But if they're not offered to Krishna, and the person just eats them, even though they're foodstuffs from the same category, which doesn't include meat, fish, or eggs, there is a reaction. There is karma. So, that's the difference. That's the difference. So the solution is to be engaged 100%, 24/7, devotional service. Hare Krishna. It's a gradual process getting there. With good guidance and good association, we can keep plugging away at it. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada says that it's like 1 penny, 1 penny, 1 penny. Pretty soon, $100. So whatever is done in devotional service is never lost, and it accumulates. So we just keep plugging away at it. 1 penny, 1 penny. Text 3. When the palanquin carriers heard the threatening words of Maharaj Rahugana, they became very afraid of his punishment and began to speak to him as follows. Commentary. According to political science, a king sometimes tries to pacify his subordinates, sometimes chastises them, sometimes derides them, sometimes rewards them. In this way, the king rules his subordinates. The bearers of the palanquin could understand that the king was angry, and he would chastise them. Text 4. O Lord, please note that we are not at all negligent in discharging our duties. We have been faithfully carrying this palanquin according to your desire. But this man who has been recently engaged to work with us cannot walk very swiftly. Therefore, we're not able to carry the palanquin with him. Prabhupada's commentary. The other palanquin carriers were Sudras, whereas Jad Bharat was not only a high-caste Brahmin, but also a great devotee. Sudras do not sympathize with other living beings, but a Vaishnava cannot act like a Sudra. Whenever a Sudra and a Brahmin Vaishnava are combined, there will certainly be imbalance in the execution of duties. Sudras were walking with the palanquin without at all caring for ants on the ground, but Jad Bharat could not act like a Sudra, therefore difficulty arose. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, we were just discussing about that. The mixing the varnas doesn't work. Interesting. Also, that last verse about how a king rules, in the purport Prabhupada was discussing, pacifies his subordinates, chastises them, derides them, or rewards them. So they're always subordinate. And that's how he rules. It's he's the boss, that's it. Sometimes he pacifies them, sometimes he chastises them, he derides them, rewards them. But it doesn't say that he communicates with them, or teaches them, or enlightens them, or makes friends with them. It doesn't work like that. The king is always the king, and it's one way, his way. That's it. Hare Krishna. That's how he behaves in relationship to his subordinates, his citizens. That's it. He's the king. And he says that's why he's like almost absolute. He's supposed to be the representative of Krishna for administration, which means he has to take good guidance from the Brahmins in order to do his service properly. I can see how intoxicating this would be. That, I mean, you're in complete control of your citizenry. Sometimes you just pacify them, sometimes you chastise them, you deride them, you reward them. It's like you're the controller of all those people's lives. I just see how corrupting that could be. A person could fall very easily into thinking that they were the be-all and the end-all of everything. How big the false ego could get in a situation like that. It's very important that they take guidance from the transcendentalists, the sages, the saints, the Brahmins, to be able to do those things nicely. and not become contaminated by a false sense of superiority. See, that's only his service. The material energy is so powerful, it can see how someone could become very illusioned about their self-importance by trying to do that service. So here we're seeing what's going to happen with Maharaj Rahugana when he meets an enlightened soul. Right now, he's doing the chastising thing. As far as he knows, there's a Sudra who's not behaving properly. I have to chastise. That's what he thinks he's about to deal with. Is an unsubmissive Sudra. So this is text 5. He's in the chastisement mode. King Rahugana could understand the speeches given by the carriers, who were afraid of being punished. He could also understand that simply due to the fault of one person, the palanquin was not being carried properly. Knowing this perfectly well and hearing their appeal, he became a little angry, although he was very advanced in political science and was very experienced. His anger arose due to his inborn nature as a king. Actually, King Rahugana's mind was covered by the mode of passion, and he therefore spoke as follows to Jad Bharat, whose Brahman effulgence was not clearly visible, being covered like a fire covered by ashes. Commentary by Prabhupada. The distinction between Rajagun and Sattvagun is explained in this verse. Although the king was very upright and advanced in political science and government management, he was nonetheless in the mode of passion, and therefore, due to a slight agitation, he became angry. Jad Bharat, despite all kinds of injustice endured because of his deaf and dumb display, remained silent by the strength of his spiritual advancement. Nonetheless, his Brahman Teja, his Brahman effulgence, was indistinctly visible in his person. So the Kshatriya, although he's well versed in government management, political science, he is influenced by the mode of passion. So in the mode of passion, if there's a little agitation, he becomes angry. It's the mode of passion. So that's what happened to King Rahugana. He's in the mode of passion, whereas Jad Bharat is in Suddha Sattva, not just Sattva, but Suddha Sattva. Text 6. King Rahugana told Jad Bharat, "How troublesome this is, my dear brother. You certainly appear very fatigued, but you have carried this palanquin alone, without assistance, for a long time, and for a long distance. Besides that, due to your old age, you become greatly troubled. My dear friend, I see that you are not very firm, nor very strong and stout. Aren't your fellow carriers cooperating with you?" In this way, the king criticized Jad Bharat with sarcastic words. Yet, despite being criticized in this way, Jad Bharat had no bodily conception of the situation. He knew he was not the body, for he had attained a spiritual identity. He was neither fat, lean, or thin, nor had anything to do with a lump of matter, a combination of 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. He had nothing to do with the material body and its 2 hands and legs. In other words, he completely realized his spiritual identity. He was therefore unaffected by the sarcastic criticism from the king. Without saying anything, he continued carrying the palanquin as before. Oh boy. So it looks like he's ignoring the king. Wow. I'm sure the king didn't like being ignored like that. So, Prabhupada's commentary. Jad Bharat was completely liberated. He did not even care when the dacoits attempted to kill his body. He knew that he certainly was not the body. Even if the body were killed, he would not have cared, for he was thoroughly convinced of the proposition found in Bhagavad Gita. Nahanyate hanyamane sarire. He knew he could not be killed, even if his body were killed. Although he did not protest, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his agent, could not tolerate the injustice of the dacoits. Therefore he was saved by the mercy of Krishna, and the dacoits were killed. In this case, while carrying the palanquin, he also knew he was not a body. His body was very strong and stout, in sound condition and quite competent to carry the palanquin. But due to his being freed from bodily conception, the sarcastic words of the king did not affect him at all. The body is created according to one's karma, and material nature supplies the ingredients for the development of a certain type of body. The soul the body covers is different from the bodily construction. Therefore, anything favorable or mischievous done to the body does not affect the spirit soul. The Vedic injunction is, the spirit soul is always unaffected by material arrangements. Krishna. To be in the presence of such a realized soul is purifying, just to be in their presence. So Maharaj Rahugana has not been able to perceive yet who he's actually dealing with. He's thinking that that's because he can't see there's like an aura that emanates from someone who's like this. Just their presence emanates something very extraordinary that others can perceive on a spiritual level. But those that are very, very covered over by the modes, they're not able to see that or perceive it. Actually, when the personality of Godhead himself is present, persons who are very covered over like that, they can't even perceive that God is standing there. Because they have their vision is so externalized. So right now, Maharaj Rahugana is like that. He's seeing externally. And he's identifying with being the king. He's the controller. It's his duty to chastise those that don't serve nicely. And so he's stuck in that way of seeing things, material consciousness, very much in the mode of passion, agitated and angry easily. And Jad Bharat, he's spoken these deriding words to Jad Bharat in a very angry mood, and Jad Bharat's just not identifying with it at all. He's not responding. He's not responding to that at all. He just doesn't identify with anything that the king has said. He's not identifying with it. So, just his presence, personality, elevated on that level, just his presence alone is so purifying. So, looks like Maharaj Rahugana is pouring out some stuff. And he'll probably just get rid of it once he pours it out like that. He's going to get relieved of it, we'll see. Text 7. Thereafter, when the king saw that his palanquin was still being shaken by the carriers, he became very angry and said, "You rascal, what are you doing? Are you dead, despite the life within your body? Do you not know that I am your master? You're disregarding me, and are not carrying out my order. For this disobedience, I shall now punish you just like Yamaraj, superintendent of death, punishes sinful people. I shall give you proper treatment so that you will come to your senses and do the correct thing." Oh, he's so angry. Oh, he's just enraged. Just enraged. I mean, he is the controller, he is the king, he's the master, and you're the subordinate. Don't you forget it. No purport on that. Text 8. Thinking himself a king, King Rahugana was in the bodily conception and influenced by material modes of passion and ignorance. Due to madness, he chastised Jad Bharat with uncalled for and contradictory words. Jad Bharat was the topmost devotee and dear abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Oh, I have to stop there. It's the middle of the verse, but Jad Bharat was the topmost devotee and the dear abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord personally was residing in Jad Bharat. We say that Jad Bharat was a devotee of the Lord fully realized, means the Lord was there with him, personally, directly. Jad Bharat had become the abode of the Lord, where worship of the Lord was going on continually. It was a transcendental abode of the Lord, residing there in Jad Bharat. Devotees are like that. Pure devotee means the Lord is there in them. Because the Lord is attracted to devotion, devotional service. That's what attracts the Lord. The Lord is all attractive. The Lord himself is all attractive, but he's attracted to devotional service. And Jad Bharat was a pure devotee. His devotional service attracted the Lord, and the Lord was abiding there in Jad Bharat. Go on with the verse. Although considering himself very learned, the king did not know about the position of an advanced devotee situated in devotional service, nor did he know his characteristics. Jad Bharat was the residence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He always carried the form of the Lord within his heart. He was the dear friend of all living beings. He did not entertain any bodily conception. He therefore smiled and spoke the following words, which is unusual because Jad Bharat doesn't usually speak. He doesn't say anything. He hasn't said anything for a very long time. He's about to speak. Prabhupada's commentary. The distinction between a person in bodily conception and a person beyond the bodily conception is presented in this verse. In the bodily conception, King Rahugana considered himself a king and chastised Jad Bharat in so many unwanted ways. Being self-realized, Jad Bharat, who was fully situated in the transcendental platform, did not at all become angry. Instead, he smiled and began to deliver his teachings to King Rahugana. A highly advanced Vaishnava devotee is a friend to all living entities. Consequently, he is a friend to his enemies also. In fact, he does not consider anyone to be his enemy. Surida sarvadehinam. Sometimes a Vaishnava becomes superficially angry at a non-devotee, but this is good for the non-devotee. We have several examples of this in Vedic literature. Once, Narada became angry with the two sons of Kuvera, Nala Kuvera and Manigriva, and he chastised them by turning them into trees. The result was that later they were liberated by Lord Sri Krishna. The devotee is situated on the absolute platform, and when he is angry or pleased, there's no difference. For either case, he bestows his benediction. Krishna. Text 9. The great Brahmin Jad Bharat said, "My dear king and hero, whatever you have spoken sarcastically is certainly true. Actually, these are not simply words of chastisement, for the body is the carrier, The load carried by the body does not belong to me, for I'm the spirit soul. There's no contradiction in your statements because I am different from the body. I'm not the carrier of the pelican. The body is the carrier. Certainly, as you have hinted, I have not labored carrying the pelican, for I'm detached from the body. You have said that I am not stout and strong, and these words are befitting a person who does not know the distinction between body and soul. The body may be fat or thin, but no learned man would say such things of the spirit soul. As far as the spirit soul is concerned, I'm neither fat nor skinny. Therefore you're correct when you say I'm not very stout. Also, if the object of this journey and the path leading there were mine, there would be many troubles for me. But because they relate not to me, but to my body, there's no trouble at all. Commentary by Srila Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita it's stated, one who is advanced in spiritual knowledge is not disturbed by the pains and pleasures of the material body. The material body is completely separate from the spirit soul, and the pains and pleasures of the body are superfluous. The practice of austerity and penance is meant for understanding the distinction between the body and soul, and how the soul can be unaffected by the pleasures and pains of the body. Jad Bharat was actually situated on the platform of self-realization. He was completely aloof from bodily conception. Therefore, he immediately took his position and convinced the king that whatever contradictory things the king had said about his body did not actually apply to him as a spirit soul. By hearing this transcendental knowledge, we can try to prepare for those times when the body will be in distress or under attack. And of course, the ultimate situation is at the time of death, when the soul is forced out of the body. But before that one big test comes, there are small tests. There's times of illness. And there are times when one's livelihood is threatened. And they're like little quizzes. And sometimes people purposefully practice difficulties on the body, austerities and penances, to make it uncomfortable so that they can, the idea is, be able to distinguish between the self, spirit, soul, and the body. But in the everyday course of activities, usually we're not put to such tests, and we more or less identify with the body and the mind as the self. By chanting Hare Krishna and engaging in devotional service, hearing, remembering, serving, then we actually go beyond liberation. Not identifying with the body, being able to distinguish spirit from matter is a liberated state. But devotional service is actually beyond the liberated state. Liberation is automatically included in devotional service. Why? Because the Lord Himself is attracted to devotional service. And when the soul is in relationship with the Lord, they don't identify with the material body or mind. So that's the super excellence of devotional service. There's no extra endeavor needed to overcome the bodily conception, material bodily conception, because the senses become purified in relationship to Krishna. So then identification with the material senses no longer takes place. One identifies with the spiritual senses in service to the Lord. Become purified of the identification with the outer covering, which is produced from desires to enjoy material nature, which are stored in the mind and carry the living entity from one gross manifestation to another. So when those desires are for Krishna, serving Krishna, pleasing Krishna, associating with Krishna, loving Krishna, relationship with Krishna, then one gives up the lower taste of trying to engage with material energy by experiencing the higher taste of relationship with Krishna, devotional service with the Lord. So Judd Bharat is beginning to discuss these things with Maharaj Rahugana. Text 10. Fatness, thinness, bodily and mental distress, thirst, hunger, fear, disagreement, desires for material happiness, old age, sleep, attachment for material possessions, anger, lamentation, illusion, identification of the body with the self, are all transformations of the material covering of the spirit soul. A person absorbed in material bodily conception is affected by these things. But I am free from all bodily conceptions. Consequently, I'm neither fat nor skinny, nor anything else you've mentioned. Prabhupada's commentary. Srila Narottam Das Thakur sung, one who is spiritually advanced has no connection with the body or with bodily actions and reactions. When one comes to understand that he's not the body, and therefore is neither fat nor skinny, one attains the topmost form of spiritual realization. When one is not spiritually realized, the bodily conception entangles one in the material world. At the present moment, all human society is laboring under bodily conceptions. Therefore, in the Shastras, people in this age are referred to as Dvipada Pashu, two-legged animals. No one can be happy in a civilization conducted by such animals. Our Krishna consciousness movement is trying to raise fallen human society to the status of spiritual understanding. It's not possible for everyone to become immediately self-realized like Judd Bharat. However, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam Bhagavata sevaya. By spreading Bhagavat principles, we can raise human society to the platform of perfection. When one is not affected by bodily conceptions, one can advance to the Lord's devotional service. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam Bhagavata sevaya Bhagavat uttama sloke bhaktir bhavati naistake. The more we advance our freedom from bodily conception, the more we are fixed in devotional service, and the more we are happy and peaceful. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya says that those who are too materially affected continue the bodily conception. Such persons are concerned with different bodily symptoms, whereas one freed from bodily conceptions lives without the body even in the material condition. The more we advance our freedom from bodily conception, the more we're fixed in devotional service. Bodily conception. So the body is there, but the identity identifying with the body is not. Now the body doesn't just mean the gross body, it also means the subtle body, or the mind. Identifying with the mind and the material intelligence. To become freed of identifying with the mind and with the intelligence and the gross body. And the way this is done is by total absorption in Krishna consciousness. And Lord Chaitanya, Krishna, as his incarnation, as his own devotee, has made this accessible, easily accessible to the fallen living beings of this age. Simply by chanting Hare Krishna, perform devotional service to the Lord. Raised to the devotional platform, simply by chanting the Lord's names, hearing about the Lord, remembering the Lord, serving, worshiping, praying, serving the lotus feet, making friends with, and offering everything to the Lord. And first and foremost is hearing and chanting. It's the medicine. The more we hear and chant, it's funny because here, say the more we advance our freedom from bodily conception, the more we're fixed in devotional service. And the more we perform devotional service, the more we become free from bodily conception. Something is set in motion that can't actually be stopped. Yeah, it can get sidetracked for a while. It's never lost. The more we're fixed in devotional service, the more we're happy and peaceful. That's the higher taste. I'm very happy, joyful, ecstatic, blissful, and peaceful. Bodily conception, anxiety, distress, dissatisfaction, fear, anger, confusion. Devotional service, peaceful and happy, no anxiety, free from the bodily conception. So there's a bit more of a discussion between where Jad Bharat is discussing these topics for the benefit of Maharaj Rahugana and for the benefit of everyone else for generations and generations and centuries and millennium later who get to hear this wonderful conversation between such an elevated, pure devotee of the Lord. So I guess we'll stop there